He's a comedian, actor, co-host of the podcast Staying In with Kumail and Emily. Please welcome back returning champion Kumail Nanjiani.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
I don't know how I'm going to get through this week. Like, physically, I don't understand how I will actually get through it. How are you doing?
My emotions are 1 inch under the surface. They are right there. There is a fin of dread poking through the water that you can see. Like, I am on a hair trigger. Trigger.
Everything is so heightened all the time. Since quarantine, I've been playing like a weekly video game, Gears of War, with like the same 5 people who are like sort of all over the country. And we always, end up talking politics. And last night I was like, as I was playing, I was like, I'm going to try an experiment. I'm just going to be really positive and just be super optimistic. And it works. You feel better. Because first of all,
I wouldn't know.
There is a lot of reason to be optimistic. I mean, if 6 months ago someone showed you this polling and was like, this is how it's going to look 5 days before the election, you would be elated. You would be thrilled. How exciting. And now we're here and we're like, oh my God, what's gonna happen?
The stakes are so much higher, right?
Yes.
There are, like, if this were a Senate race and we saw these kinds of polls, we would feel more assured. We shouldn't feel assured because just a small swing, just a small unexpected result, and all of a sudden these states will move together. So there's reason to be uncertain. This is something I told myself I would tell myself now, but actually forgot to tell myself until this week. And to me, one of the lessons from 2016 is in the run-up to Election Day, I remember feeling this extraordinary pressure to calm people down as a podcast host. And we did it, right? We said, here are the reasons why we see some good signs. Here are the places where we're nervous. But basically, don't panic. It wasn't don't panic, don't work. It was just don't panic. But what I realized in hindsight was it just doesn't fucking matter how we feel this week.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter at all.
Right. Right.
Okay, you feel like shit because you think we're going to lose Florida? We might. If we win the election, we will forget this moment entirely. And if we lose, this is joy compared to the grief and panic and anger and fear that we will feel. This is dread. And dread sucks. It feels really bad, but it's a pre-emotion. It's fear of an outcome. It feels like 5 minutes before the school play all the time. It's just like nobody's in costume.
And somehow it feels it's 5 minutes before the school play and it's getting more heightened, but it's still 5 minutes before the school play. Like somehow every moment I'm getting more worked up, but I feel like time isn't moving. It's just the stakes are getting higher. What you said is about how you feel is not going to change anything. I think that's very insightful, and it's something I had with my work, like with acting. I used to get really nervous for it, and I thought that being nervous was part of the process. And then I was like, no, that actually hurts me. It had become like sense memory, where I was like, all right, time to do a scene, time to get nervous, heart starts beating, you get a little sweaty, that stuff. And I realized no, that's actually bad. That's not part of the process. And that's exactly, I think you're right with this thing too. This fear, this dread isn't part of the process. It doesn't do anything. I decided about a month ago, my job for the next month and a half is going to be trying to get people to vote. I'll donate and I'll try and do as many Zooms, panels, whatever I can do. This is going to be my job, and that'll make me feel a little bit better. And that really has made me feel better. The only time I don't feel that dread is when I'm that moment that you donate and you get that email. It wears off so quickly though, because Emily's like, hey, you gotta chill out a little bit.
Act Blue is like a dealer outside of school.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I'll read something, I'll see your buddy Jon Favreau will be like, hey, this race is pretty close. I'm like, okay, all right, gotta go donate here, I guess, because I've maxed out what I can give to Biden. But then there's all these other little Senate races where you're like, all right, I gotta be able to say that I did something. So those are the things that make me feel a little bit better. Because in 2016, I wasn't following it as much. I was so cocky. I was so sure that this was gonna go, the way that it ended up not going. And when I look back at polling, Hillary was up by 4 points at this point or something. And I was like, why were we so confident? Why did we think? And I think part of it is because the idea of Trump becoming president was so ridiculous. It seemed so unrealistic that even though the polling was getting tighter, I wasn't getting any more nervous. I certainly didn't do anything for the last election. So I was like, at least this time I'll do everything I can. And I know that probably barely moves the needle, but
everybody doing that, I think I would rather everyone believe Trump can win than believe he can't. And
right.
If that is the lesson we took from 2016, that's a good lesson to help get us out of this thing, you know?
Yeah.
So let's get into it. What an election. We like to start out with as dumb a joke as humanly possible because the stakes are so high, emotions are so fraught. So let me start with the worst joke we could come up with this week. Are you ready?
Wow, so ready.
Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed to the Supreme Court, giving conservatives a 6-3 majority. This whole thing has been quite a roller coaster ride. Amy Coney Barrett, more like Amy Coney Island.
Okay. It hasn't even been a roller coaster because we knew what was going to happen. It's just been like a drop into despair. That's maybe a good example of release, right? Where you're like, listen, this is lost. There's nothing we can do about this. This sucks. Focus on the election. Do what you can. This battle is gone. But if we win the next one, maybe we could do something about it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think there was a desire to not even pay attention to it because there was an understanding that ordinary democratic politics wouldn't make a difference, that these people had decided that they were not receptive to pressure, to political pressure. And it's a reminder that what we're fighting for in this election is obviously to defeat Donald Trump and elect Democrats, but also just restoring the basic notion of elected officials responsive to their constituents and responsive to normal democratic pressures, which this group of Senate Republicans have decided no longer apply to them either because they don't believe in them or they think they're going to lose anyway.
A really important thing is just the level of discourse, these sort of hateful statements that have become part of public political conversation as if they're like valid discussions and arguments. I think it's really eroded our community in the last 4 years. So I know that hopefully if we can win, climbing back from this is going to be work. But I will feel like, I had this thing like a couple of years ago. I went out of the country and as soon as I got off the plane, I felt lighter. I was like, oh, wow, everyone in America is carrying this heaviness on their shoulders. And when when we got to London, couldn't feel it anymore. I was like, oh my God. So I'm excited, hopefully, for a little bit of that feeling to go because it's not just us that's feeling it. I don't think MAGA people are happy either. They seem fucking miserable and angry.
Look, I mean, if we get rid of Trump, I think we have to start to ask ourselves the question, how did someone like that become so hard to defeat? It took so much to get rid of him. It took so much to dislodge this evil, obviously unfit person. We have to do two things at once, which is be honest about the role that racism and racial animus and grievance and white identity politics played in the rise of Donald Trump, while also being open to a conversation about how much pain these people misplaced when they embrace this person, that both of those things can be true. Economic uncertainty has become a joke, and it is a joke. But at the same time, there is a real connection between the role that masculinity and the refusal to admit that you have needs, that you feel a loss of dignity, a lack of agency, a lack of control, and demagogues and others harnessing that feeling, that sense of indignity, that lack of control, and directing it towards the other, towards immigrants, towards electing Republicans who will do nothing for you, convincing you that you don't need healthcare, that you don't need social services, that you don't need a mask at this rally, that you can be left outside in the fucking cold in Omaha, that you don't have worth, right? We have to figure out how to have this conversation about human worth and why believing in it is okay. It's okay to need the government. It's okay to need community. It's okay to be afraid, to be scared, to be uncertain.
Yeah. It's okay to do things to care for your neighbors and your spouses and your family and your friends. Wearing a mask is not cowardice. It's selflessness, actually. The idea that wearing a mask has been equated to emasculation is so bananas to me. It's so crazy. And you're right, men, we've made a hell for ourselves, and for other people, definitely. But also for ourselves, I think that we're just as imprisoned by these ideals of machoism or whatever. We also pay the price, you know? I mean, I think a lot of it, you're right, is because we don't want to feel fear or sadness or even joy. And so everything, you sort of turn it into anger, and then suddenly there's a guy who like allows you, who gives you targets that you can be angry at.
So, back to this week. Both of us are in this. We're both in this I'm in the same place, this sort of purely reflective, not in my stomach place. But so, as voters dropped off ballots and voted early across the country, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows went on CNN and offered a closing message: "We are not going to control the coronavirus." Meadows went on to say, and another thing, I don't think he can read. That's it. That was, of course, only one part of the message. Jared Kushner also went on Fox and Friends and said this.
thing we've seen in a lot of the black community, which is mostly Democrat, is that President Trump's policies are the policies that can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about, but he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful.
Kushner went on to say, "This is actually not that easy to write a joke about because it's beyond parody, as I am a famous trust fund kid whose own father, when not committing acts of white-collar crime, promised $2.5 million to Harvard before I was accepted to be paid after I was accepted." Kushner went on to say, "You can tell they're not trying since some of them aren't even the president's son-in-law." It's okay. Meanwhile, as a third wave of coronavirus hits the country, a second wave hit the White House. At least 5 aides to Mike Pence, the leader of the coronavirus task force, tested positive, including Pence's body man and his chief of staff. I used to think it was so silly when televangelists like Pat Robertson would say that God had chosen sides in an election. But now I just think it's true. I do. I just believe it. I don't even think that's a joke. I think I actually believe that. That's it. I'm in.
Also, I never heard this phrase body man, and now I throw it around. That's just what we call like an assistant?
Yeah. It's more than that, though. It's somebody who's always with them. Like President Obama had Reggie Love, Hillary Clinton had Huma Abedin. Like there's a person that's always with the candidate. So it's like there is an executive assistant who's usually at the Senate office or the Oval Office or somewhere, but there's a person who's just always on the road. That's the person who's like got the Sharpie, got the Purell, has the notebook, knows who to respond to, takes the notes.
Like
yes.
Veep.
Yes, Tony Scott on Veep. Also this week, the Lincoln Project, famous for viral anti-Trump ads by Never Trump Republicans, announced that they are planning to turn into a full-fledged media company after the election. Just like Lincoln, they hope to celebrate a hard-won victory with some light entertainment.
Oh, no.
What? I think it's fine. I think it's a fine joke.
I think it's a good joke.
He got killed at the play.
I know. I remember. I remember reading about it on Twitter.
What is that play called? It's something called like, My Fancy Aunt Martha. Something like that.
Was it a great play?
I don't think it has that much of a legacy. What is the play that Lincoln died
The legacy is that Lincoln died during the play.
Oh, it's not My Aunt Martha. It's not My Aunt Fancy. It's Our American Cousin.
Yeah, I've never heard of that show.
Countless Trump supporters were stranded in the freezing cold for hours, and several ended up in the hospital after Trump's rally in Omaha concluded, and hundreds were trapped miles from their cars and unable to get to their buses because the path was obstructed by this giant, obvious heaving metaphor. And in the face of Trump's ongoing threats against voters and political opponents, 24 U.S. attorneys and all Republicans have publicly called Donald Trump a threat to the rule of law in our country and endorsed Joe Biden for president. When reached for comment on the tarmac in Omaha, a shivering baby boomer in a MAGA hat who has an autographed copy of Dan Bongino's book said, "Seems like Biden is better at getting Republicans on the bus than Trump. Oh, are you surprised that I made this self-aware joke? Little gallows tarmac humor. I can't feel my toes, but I think the virus is a hoax, and I still love Trump." Just a long journey for that one.
No, I like it. It feels very real.
Imagine being in the hospital because of exposure, because you were stuck outside after Donald Trump left you in the dark after a rally in Omaha. In the cold, in the freezing Omaha November cold.
Did you see just one today in I think in Florida? People were passing out because it was so hot. They had to spray people with water, and people were passing out.
And they're all super spreader events, right? We now know that there's a real correlation between local rises in cases and where this Trump tour, this super spreader tour goes. It's legitimately pro-virus.
It's pretty amazing. Do you think, I know that they on purpose didn't want to do any contact tracing. Will we ever find out the full fallout from all these events and that Rose Garden massacre? Will we ever, you think, get numbers on these are the people who actually died from this?
I think that's an open question. So I've always said, coming full circle, the period of time I've always been most worried about was the time after Donald Trump is no longer going to be president, but is still in office. That's when it's going out of business sale on national parks. It's shredding time. It's every lobbyist fantasy executive order. It's the destruction of materials, of emails, of what have you. So I don't know what happens in that interim, but I do think that in the ordinary course of business, you would expect a lot of these records to be preserved. There's also privacy concerns around people releasing their own medical information. So I think likely we will never know the full scope of these things.
That's how I feel.
It's they did it. They covered it up. We know a lot, but we don't know it all.
No, we don't know it all, but we know it was real bad.
Yeah. That's the conclusion of the last 4 years. We'll know a lot, we won't know it all, and we'll know it was real bad. Kumail, before we let you go, we are asking everybody this question today, which is to finish the sentence, I'm anxious but.
I mean, I'm trying to find something unique to say, but the first thing that comes to my mind is I'm anxious, but I feel very, very hopeful when I see, these pre-voting, these early voting numbers. When I see those people standing in lines, obviously that means two things. One, it's voter suppression, but two, it is inspiring to see people fighting against a system that's been designed to silence their voices, to not count their votes. So I do feel ultimately I am extremely anxious, but I do feel hopeful. I've always been pretty optimistic, and it's been hard to hold on to that these 4 years. But I do feel, hopeful, and I feel optimistic, and I think we can come out of this. It's not going to be easy, but I believe.
What's your Tuesday night cheat meal?
Oh my God, I haven't even, when I think of Tuesday, I my brain starts short circuiting. It's
Sure.
Just numbers and green squares are flying around. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Emily today was like, so what are we going to do Tuesday? And I was like, I don't know. And I ran away. I think I'm going to get just a burger, fries, and a bunch of desserts. That's what I'm going to do. That's what I need. Just pastries and cakes. That's always my cheat meal, and that's what it's going to be on Wednesday. What's your plan for Tuesday?
I think I'm going to need something stronger. That's a great question. I haven't really thought about it. I think. Well, yeah. I want to see what I can do to help during the day. There's some last minute get out the vote stuff that people can do that we're going to direct people towards Tuesday night. We're going to do a brief live stream before the returns come in. God, it might just be a pizza night. You might just have to say, you know what? I need a pizza to be here.
I'm changing to pizza. That's it. I'm changing to pizza.
I just think you need a box that you can go back to. That's classic. You just need that box. It's just going to be there. And there's just always more pizza in there. It's always in there. Whatever happens, there's more pizza in those boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. When do the returns start coming in? What time are you going to sort of lock in?
First polls close 6 p.m. Eastern, I believe. And last polls close, I think Alaska closes at 1 a.m. Eastern. I think 7 p.m. is when the first swing states start to close. 6 p.m. I think. I want to say Kentucky, Indiana. I don't know. But 6 and 7, then they start coming in. Then we'll start seeing them.
I mean, what sucks is the mail ballots not being counted, until later. In a lot of states, Pennsylvania, for instance, that's a real bummer.
Yeah. Gonna have to white knuckle it.
It is amazing how blatant the attempts at suppression of vote have been. It is shameless, unrelenting, and absolutely mind-boggling just how they're not even trying to hide it.
Yeah, well, they got one. It's one last heist. They're trying to get away from De Niro at the airport, and they're not going to be brought in. They're not going to be brought in. Kumail Nanjiani, thank you so much for being here. This was a delight. I'll see you on the other side. We'll see what happens when we cross. We're going to cross the event horizon, and we're going to find out what's in this black hole.
Yeah, I think that's right. Do you know The Watchmen? Do you know that comic book? Mm-hmm. You know how there's like Dr. Manhattan can only see up to a certain date. He can't see past that because of tachyons or something. That's how the election is to me. I can only see to Tuesday, and then I don't know what happens.
I want you to know I did the exact same analogy, but around the show Devs.
Oh, yeah, love devs too.
Same thing. All right.
It's
We
the
can't
same
see
thing.
past what happens.
There's a day.
That's it.
Yeah.
This quantum computer
Yeah.
can only see so far. Bye,
Yeah.
Kumail. Thank you so much.
Thank you.